Good morning, everybody. Hey, man, it is so good to see you and to be with you. Things could have been very different today, couldn't they? But we get to come together and be together. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty ecstatic about that fact that we just get to be together. Can we just say thank you to Jesus for that we get to be here, man? I mean, that's huge. That's so huge that we get to do this. We want to, like Greg said and like Lindsay said, continue praying for those. Maybe you're one of them who has some issues at your house. If you need some help, let us know. We would love to gather together as a church family and help you in some way, whether it's taking down a tree that's fallen or helping you to get some water out of your house. You let us know. Come find me after service and we'll try to make that happen with you. For now, though, we're continuing a series today called 9 Lives. And this is a series that's all about who we are, what makes us tick, and what God might have to say about that, what God thinks about that. And it's important, right? It's important because so many of us don't understand who we are. We go through life and there's this level of anguish with us, a level of tension within us and with other people because we don't understand ourselves, let alone other people. And because we don't understand ourselves and because we don't understand other people, we don't love ourselves and we don't love other people in the way we're supposed to, which matters a lot because when Jesus was asked, hey, what is the greatest commandment? What is it that God really ultimately wants from us, Jesus? Jesus' response was, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So you got to love God. We expect that in church, but also you've got to love other people and yourself implicitly, right? You have to love yourself. But so many of us, we struggle through life because we don't know who we are and we don't even know where to begin finding out and figuring out who we are, let alone all those other people out there who make me mad all the time, right? We struggle through that sort of thing. So what we want to do is we want to use this series to figure out exactly who we might be and who others are so that we can love better. And to do that, we've been using a tool that we call the Enneagram. This is just a tool. It's not a replacement for the Bible. It's not like a horoscope or anything like that. This is just a tool that we look at to develop, to think about different personalities that we see across all of human society. It's not divine in any way. It's not infallible in any way, but I do think it's helpful. We've been going through about halfway through the series at this point, and we started off with the 8s, and then we went to the 9s, the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, and today we'll be looking at the type 4s on the Enneagram. Now, I want to say this as we continue on. We're about halfway through this, and one of the things you might have figured out is, if you've been listening to all of them at this point, that you kind of have something in common with each one of these numbers, don't you? There may be something in you that says, hey, I kind of identify with that in the 2, but also with the 8 and with the 3. That's because there's something of each of these numbers within each of us. One of them just happens to be a little bit more dominant. And so if we determine like, hey, I am this type person, that doesn't mean that you're going to fit 100 out of 100 categories with that. There are infinite variations on each one of these types. So you are still a special snowflake. Don't worry. You're exactly like your mommy always said you were. You are a very special angel. But there are these different types that we think encompass some of these basic personalities. And today we're looking at type 4, which is often referred to as the individualist or the romantic. The individualist or the romantic. And here's basically what you need to know about these type 4s, what you need to know about these individualists, romantics, is that these are the people who want to be different. These are the people who want to be an individual. We all know this person, don't we? And unless you're a 4, they might drive you a little bit nuts. Because these are the people who go out of their way to dress differently. They have different hairstyles a lot of times. The careers they choose leave you going, what are you thinking? Right? These are the people who always have to listen to the latest band, or if it's not the latest band, it's some obscure band from the 1950s that only played Dan Electro guitars, and you're like, what is a Dan Electro guitar? They're great, right? Like all of that. Like they're those people. Now, maybe you're thinking in your head about people you know already. Stay with me because it gets even better than that. But essentially, a type 4 person is the one who wants to be unique, wants to be an original. Maybe you're here this morning and you're like, well, I'm not a number. I'm not even none of these have applied to me. This one certainly won't. You might be a 4, so pay attention, okay? You might be a 4. These are people who really try to be hard to be unique and to be an individual. They want to be different from everybody else, but they also want to be accepted by everybody else. So they may kind of thumb their nose a little bit at everybody else's style and the majority and all that. And they may want to be in the minority all the time and be just themselves and unique. They can't even believe that anybody else would be just like them at all. It bothers them to be like everybody else. They still want to be accepted by the crowd, by the group, by the everybody. They want people to get them. They want people to get them. The problem is these people generally have eccentric ways of communicating. So they want people to understand them, but the way they try to get people to understand them is usually in an eccentric way, which, as you might have guessed, is kind of off-putting for everybody who's not that eccentric, right? So maybe you've had somebody in your life and they showed up to school, they were new, and they tried getting to know everybody, and next thing you know, they're not really fitting in very well, so they just kind of go all in the other way. They start wearing a fedora to class every day, right? They only wear pink Converse shoes ever. Like, that's all they ever wear, even if it's against the dress code. Like, they go all in the other way, and they start doing all sorts of weird stuff almost to get attention. And for a lot of us, that can be fairly annoying and off-putting. But for that type 4 person, that's just their way of communicating. Say, hey, I'm unique and I have something to offer. I'm original and I have something to offer. You need to listen to me. That can be really tough as a kid. That can be really tough as a kid, especially as a teenager. See, when you're little and you do these kind of offbeat things, it's cute. It's kind of cute. Mom and dad are like, you're awesome. You're the great. Everybody laughs and it's funny. And as you get older, people want you to fall in line a little bit more. And the type 4s, man, they're going, well, I'm still unique. I'm still unique. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to capture love by being unique and being special, the same way they did when they were young. Because here's the deal. At some point, they received this message, or at some point, they just thought it to themselves. They feel like there's something missing in them, that there's something lacking, there's something wrong with them. That when God made them missing an extra little piece that everybody else has. And so they see everybody else happy, they see stuff on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and they think to themselves, I want that, but I don't have it, and I don't know if I'll ever get it. So they do everything they can to try to capture that love. And so they express it, usually in more eccentric type ways. Because they feel like there's something missing in them or something lacking, they often carry around a lot of feelings of shame and inferiority. Imagine going through life like that. Some of you do. You do this. Now, it's been said that 4s don't have feelings, they are feelings. Because whatever comes up in them, they just go full tilt into that feeling. So 4s, they have feelings like the rest of us, normal feelings, but they embellish them. So if they're happy, they're really happy. If they're sad, oh, woe is me, right? They're clutching the pearls. Everything is wrong, right? If they're angry, they're really angry. If they're hurt, they're really hurt. They live on those feelings, and sometimes they can go quickly from one to the other, and we look at them like something's wrong, but that's just how they deal with their emotions. Now, you might have thought with me, when I was going through all this originally, I remember thinking, this sounds like a bunch of artists I know, like a bunch of musicians, a bunch of people who I know who like to paint. And so in your head, you may have already kind of put together this caricature of a 4, like somebody who is always wearing a beret and a turtleneck and playing a guitar and sipping on lattes and espressos at the local coffee house, right? Reading beat poetry and stuff like that. But that's not the only people who are 4s. A lot of them are people like football coaches. I know a mammoth of a man who is, I believe, an Enneagram 4. Very creative, very thoughtful, very emotional, very feelings-oriented. Great football coach. I've known bank tellers who are fours. I've known teachers who are fours. I've known pastors who are fours. And I bet you can think of somebody right now who fits a lot of the characteristics I've been mentioning, who isn't necessarily an artist, but they are artistic. Because they're artistic and because they feel like there's something missing in them and they're searching for it, they're also really into authenticity. Really into authenticity. And if you're an inauthentic person or you're a poser around them, they have no time for you. They don't want to be around you. They got nothing to talk about with you. Now, these are pretty specific, but the broad strokes of it look kind of like this. Their basic desire of a 4 is to find themselves and their significance. We all want that, but that's what motivates and drives them. They want to find out who I am, what's my identity, and why do I matter at all? What do I have to bring to the table? Because their basic fear is of having no identity or personal significance. I mean, can you imagine if you didn't have an identity or a personal significance? Life isn't worth living, a 4 would say. Now, because they're always searching and trying to find these things and they're afraid, it's like a matter of life and death if they have a personal identity or if they don't have personal significance, because they're always searching and they're looking for that authenticity and they want what they see everybody have. Their deadly sin, the thing that can sneak up and get them quick and ruin a lot of life for them, is envy. Envy. I mean, if you really believe that you are lacking something, if you really believe that everybody else kind of had it figured out, well, then envy makes sense, doesn't it? Envy is definitely something that could kind of pop up and get you, isn't it? Because you want the normalcy and the happiness that everybody else has, at least as you see it. When they're unhealthy, 4s have problems with melancholy, often depression, self-indulgence, self-pity, shame, and inferiority. They can also be quite manipulative, and they'll use the victim card. They'll play a victim in order to get people to stick around in relationships and to want to be there for them. But when they're at that sounds bad, but when they're at their best, these are some of the most important people you can have on your team or in your life, because they're creative, they're inspiring. Like when they are inspired, they are inspiring to other people. And they look at things in ways that you would never think to look at them. If you're a 4, you have a way of looking at the world that's intrinsic to you that other people don't have, and you have so much to offer to the world in that regard, right? When you're healthy as a 4, you're also going to be more emotionally honest, and you're going to be able to have self-control when it comes to your feelings. So you won't just act on your feelings. You'll be able to control it a little bit. I want to give you an example of somebody that I think is a 4. Somebody I think we find in Scripture that's a 4. A guy named Saul. Now, in order to understand who Saul is and why Saul matters and what the big deal is with Saul's story, you have to understand ancient Israel. In ancient Israel, there were no kings. Like in ancient Israel, there were no kings. Right? You remember, if you know anything of the story, they're in Egypt, and God brings them out of Egypt, out of slavery, out of bondage in Egypt. There's a guy who leads them out. Do you remember his name? Moses. Very good. 10 points and a gold star for you. Right? Moses leads them out, and then Joshua. And there's a series of prophets and judges. And these prophets and judges, they kind of lead everything. They kind of get everybody going. Whenever there's a question about what do we do, whenever there's a dispute to be settled, they go to this prophet or this judge, whoever it happens to be at the time. If there's a battle to be fought, and they're thinking about, hey, who are we going to fight, and do we need to fight them? What do we need to do? How is this going to go? They go to the prophet and to the judge. They functioned as these leaders, but Israel didn't have any king except for God. God was their king. And that's the only way it needed to be. Which makes sense, because if God is the creator and the sustainer, and if God is all-powerful and omniscient and all of those things, if God is those things, and God is your king, well, that's really great news, because you can never lose at that point. if you're following and if you're listening. And these prophets and these judges acted as God's mouthpiece. They were seen to have this direct connection to God. And they acted as God's mouthpiece, but they weren't the king. God was the king. Well, after a few years, Israel decided that they wanted a king. They looked around at all the nations around them and they said, hey, we need a king too. That's why the Philistines are able to be so successful. That's why this group is being successful. That's why they're able to do this. And they got a little bit jealous, right? Envy kind of struck in there too. And they said, we need a king. we need a king too. And God said, wait a minute, I'm your king. I'm your king. What do you mean? I'm the best king there is. I'm good to you. I make sure good things happen. All of that. Well, God being God, here's the people of Israel. And he says, all right, look, I'll give you a king. I'll give you a king. I'll give you what you want. It's not the best way, but it's what you seem to want. Here's why it's not the best way. Because as the king goes, so the culture goes. That's true in anything, right? Like a church, an organization, a school. As the leader goes, so the organization goes in general. And so God's saying, look, I'm the best there could be as a king. You might want to just stick with me, but since you want a king, just be aware that if this king strays away from me, you're going to stray away. And then I'm going to have to remove my hand of protection, and things are going to not be great. Israel says, yeah, but we want a king. We need a king. We got these Philistines around us, and we need somebody to deliver us. And God says, okay. So he goes to Samuel, who's the prophet, the judge at the time, and says, I'm going to give them a king. They want a king. Samuel doesn't like it. He doesn't like it at all. He knows what's entailed by that, but he says, fine, just tell me what you want me to do. And that's where Saul enters into the equation. Here's what we find Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 9. There was a wealthy, influential man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. He was the son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechorath, son of Aphiah, of the tribe of Benjamin. Now, that's a lot of son of in there, and begets and all that if you're reading the other translations. But what's important here is this tribe of Benjamin, because the tribe of Benjamin was the smallest tribe, the most insignificant tribe. Remember, these tribes come from Jacob's 12 sons. Benjamin was the youngest. And in an ancient patriarchal culture, the oldest son was the most important child and got most of the inheritance. Benjamin was the youngest, so he was the least important, the least valued, and it extended to his family, to his tribe that came after him. So this man named Kish, he's an influential man within the tribe of Benjamin. He's wealthy too, which is pretty good news, I guess. Here's what we find out about Kish. His son was the most handsome man in Israel, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the land. His son's name was Saul. Man, head and shoulders tall above everybody else. Good looking too. I hate him already, right? Yeah, man. Yeah, God. We need a king. May as well give us the tallest one and the most handsome one. Yeah. But I don't know if you know this. I don't know why God chose Saul. I don't know why God would choose Saul. But I have a theory. And my theory is this, that this is Israel's first king. And so if you've got a people who've never had a king, you want to give them somebody who looks like a king, right? And if there's a guy who is head and shoulders, a foot taller than everybody else, if everybody else is talking in a room and that person walks in and they start talking, you kind of naturally do that because there's a focal point to look at, right? Like if an NBA player walked in here and started talking, you'd go, oh, that guy's really tall. We should listen to him, right? In fact, I don't know if you've seen these studies, but when it comes to leadership and people who get put in charge of things, the taller you are, the better. The more likely you are to be chosen for a position of leadership. So all of us average height kings just have to suffer through and be really good at it. Sorry, David. No, there's an actual study that's been done that the taller you are, the more likely you are to be placed in a position of leadership. And so if that's true for us today, it's also true thousands of years ago. Also true thousands of years ago. So maybe it is this, that God understood the people he was working with and said, if they're going to need a king, I can give them somebody. I can give them somebody who looks like a king is supposed to look. Well, Saul wasn't king yet. He's still working with his father. He was kind of green around, you know what I mean? He was still wet behind the ears, didn't really have a lot going on, didn't really know a lot. One day, their donkeys get away, and that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. In an agrarian society, if your livestock gets away, you got to go find them. This is wide open country, and so he's got to go and find these donkeys. So Saul takes a servant with him, and they go looking for these donkeys, and they search, and they search, and they search for a few days. Next thing we know, they haven't found him after a couple of days, and they're about to turn home. Saul says, hey, I think we need to turn home because people are going to come and try to find us because they're going to be more worried about us than the donkeys. Let's just turn home. We'll meet them on the way. No big deal. His servant says, well, hold on just one second. Let's think about it just a little bit longer. I think that there's a seer or a prophet just up the road over there. I've heard that Samuel, that guy who's the prophet, the judge, is up the road over here. Let's go see that. You know, remember, this is the servant. He's not in charge. Saul is supposed to be in charge, but he's still a little bit new, still a little bit green. And so he goes along with what the servant says. And they show up and they go to the house of Samuel, to the town of Samuel. And as they're walking down the road, Samuel sees them from afar. And this is what happens. When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said, that's the man I told you about. He will rule my people. To which Samuel probably thought, oh, he looks like a king. That's great news. That's great news. Awesome. He's going to rule the people. This is going to happen. It's going to be great. Samuel sees him, and so Samuel is waiting for him. And here comes Saul. He comes walking up, and he says, hey, do you know where the seer's house is or the prophet's house is? And then Samuel says, that's me. I'm the guy. I'm the guy. Why don't you come up with me and eat with me, stay with me, and then tomorrow I'll send you on your way. I'll help you figure some stuff out. So that's exactly what he does. And then we see Samuel saying this to Saul. And don't worry about those donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, for they have been found. Great news. Great news. That's what I set out to do. And I'm here to tell you, Saul, that you and your family are the focus of all Israel's hopes. Well, that's a change. I mean, think about it. If you're Saul, you set out looking for donkeys. You're just this tall guy who all the ladies love to look at, right? Like, you're just that guy, and then you are here, and the guy that everybody trusts, the guy that everybody listens to, the guy that everybody bases their future on for the most part, says to you, hey, you and your family are the focus of all Israel's hopes. Everything rests on you. Now, we don't have a great modern equivalent for this, do we? Not a really great one. But it's almost like in the movies, you know, when you look at like Star Wars or like Harry Potter or something like that, where there's this person who has this latent ability they didn't know they had, and now somehow the fate of the entire world is on their shoulders, and they're having to develop this thing, and then they don't know anything about it. It's kind of like that, right? But imagine maybe if like the president of the United States suddenly showed up at your doorstep and said, I need you. You're the only one who can help us. All of our hopes are in your hands. It's that kind of gravity of the situation. Look at Saul's response. Saul replied, but I'm only from the tribe of Benjamin. Remember, the smallest tribe in Israel. And to make matters worse, my family is the least important of all the families of that tribe. Now, a lot of people, if they're told all of our hope rests in you, The focus of our hope is in you. You're the only one who can save us. A lot of people would go, cool, I like that. Saul's the opposite. He's like, I don't know, no way. That's you can't be talking to me. No way. And then he says this, why are you talking like this to me? Why are you talking like this to me? See, type 4 people often struggle to see in themselves what everybody else sees in them. They struggle to see the value and the good in themselves that everybody else sees in them. Remember, these are people who largely think that there's something wrong with them, something that's missing within them. And they struggle to see the good that other people point out. They struggle to see what could be, what their potential might be that other people see very clearly and plainly. In fact, so much so with Saul that later on when Samuel gathers all Israel together, he says, look, I'm going to anoint our new king, and everybody's pumped up about that. And he says, you guys wanted a king. I got you a king. This is straight from God. He wants this guy to be the king if you're going to have a king, but it's still a bad idea, whatever. All right, so drum roll, please. Your next king is... Where'd he go? They don't know where Saul went. He had been there, then he leaves. They find him hiding by everybody's luggage. Can you imagine that? The tallest guy in Israel is like doing this to him by the luggage. That's the type of guy we're dealing with. That's the type of person we're dealing with. Why are you talking like this to me? I'm the least important of all of these. Because he didn't understand what other people saw in him. He didn't understand what God saw in him. Now, this would be a great story if that's where it ended, but unfortunately, it's not where it ended. It's not the end of the story. Things went well for Saul right at the beginning. He did things like he was supposed to do. He did things that made sense. But he started going into his unhealthy side a little bit. See, a lot of times, fours have the propensity to start doing things their own way. They want to figure out their own way of doing things. I've got a better way. I'll figure it out for myself. Unfortunately for Saul, his way of doing things often contradicted what God was trying to do. Often went against what God had said to do. For instance, at one point, Saul was supposed to wait on Samuel to do a sacrifice, this sacrificial ritual before a battle. And he was told, look, Samuel will be here in 7 days. Samuel didn't show up fast enough for Saul. And so Saul says, you know what? All that's really important here is that I give some kind of a sacrifice. All that's really important here is that there's a sacrifice given. So why does it have to be Samuel? Why can't it just be me? I mean, I'm the king. I'm the leader. All of Israel's hopes are focused on me, so I should just go ahead and do this. Because he was looking around and he was seeing his men starting to leave. They were getting scared over there. So he said, look, I need to rally them together. And so he just performs the sacrifice. And about the time he gets done, guess who shows up? Old Samuel comes walking up. And Saul saunters on out there and he says, hey man, how's it going? Samuel looks at him and goes, hey, what are you doing? Why did you do that? What are you doing? And Saul says, well, I mean, all that's really important is the sacrifice. What do you mean? It's fine, no big deal. Samuel says, it's a big deal. It's about obedience. It's about listening to what God has for you. It's about being the person God called you to be by being obedient. You're the king of God's covenant people. That means you have a covenant with God. And that means you have to do what God says. Sometime after that, Saul and his men, Saul and his army were supposed to decimate, entirely wipe out, take it to the ground, an entire city. And, they won the battle, but they didn't decimate the city. And so Samuel comes walking up to Saul and says, hey, Saul, what's going on here? You didn't decimate the city. And Saul says, well, it's no big deal. I just use some of the plunder to give to my men, stuff like that. It's what everybody does. It's what you're supposed to do. And the rest of the stuff is sacrifice for God. Samuel goes, you still don't understand. It's about obedience. It's about obedience, man. Saul does this enough that finally God rejects Saul as king and instead chooses David as his replacement. And this brings out that deadly sin. This brings out that deadly sin in Saul. Because suddenly, people aren't singing Saul's praises anymore. Now they're singing songs about David and how great David is and how they want David to be their king. I think all of us have been there probably at some point where we're looking at everybody else is lauding this other person and we think it should be us. Remember Saul. Saul was the guy who didn't even think he deserved to be king. Saul was the guy who didn't even think he deserved to be king at all. And now he's jealous of this other guy who's going to be king instead of him. If anything, he should have been relieved. The problem was Saul forgot his identity rested in God alone. That as king, he was only king because God wanted him to be king. He allowed that envy to fester within him. Envy's a killer for all of us, isn't it? I mean, it's a major killer for all of us. You know what happens when we get envious of other people and when we look at what's going on in their life and all the stuff that they have, when we have envy of others, is we're saying that thing that they have, that family they have, that situation they have, that job they have, that house they have, this thing they have, those children they have. If I had those, I would feel complete. If I had those, then my identity would be realized finally. I would have my identity. I would have my personal significance if I had those. That's what happens when we allow envy to take root in us. But friends, the thing Saul needed to remember and the thing that you and I need to remember, especially if you think you might be a type 4 person, is this: your identity can only be found in God. So many of us, we spend so much time trying to figure out who we are. We're envious of what other people have and how they have it. We spend so much time trying to find ourselves and figure out all this stuff that we never stop to ask the one who made us who we are. We never stop to think that maybe the one who created us and the one who sustains us might have a lot to say about what our identity really is. I have a 9-month-old daughter, and she's the best. Like she's awesome, and she's got her own little personality now, and she's really funny. She knows what she wants and what she does not want at all, and what she wants is mama, but she loves me too, just not as much, like that sort of thing. And so I'm holding her, and when she's done with me, when she wants to get down or she wants to go to her mom, she will literally push my face away, push my face away, right? Now, I don't know anything about who she's going to be, what she's going to be capable of, what she's currently capable of. I just know she can push my face away, and when she smiles at me, I melt. That's all I know. I don't know what she's going to be like in the future. I don't know if she's going to be a headache or a blessing. I don't know any of that stuff. What I do know is that no matter what it looks like, I love her. What I do know is no matter where she goes in life, I love her. And that's exactly the way God looks at you. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter what you say, you are loved and there's nothing you can do about it. God loves you. As a parent loves their child, your identity can only be found in God. And I'm afraid that so many of you have never understood that. It's not about being this or that, or having this or that. It's recognizing that your identity can only be found in God. Because friends, when you rest in that, you can rest in that. When you understand it, you can absolutely rest in that. Because then you don't have anything to prove to anybody else. You recognize that there's nothing missing in you, that you were created by God just as you are. And that's your baseline. Everything else is just like the cherry on top, man. That's icing on the cake, is all this other stuff you get to call yourself with, whether it's mom or dad or this or that. It doesn't matter. All of that stuff is secondary to your identity, your baseline identity of being a child of God. And that's why your identity can only be found there. So this morning, if you think that you might be a 4, if you might be a type 4 person, I have a couple of challenges for you. The first one is this. I want you to cultivate self-control in your life. Cultivate self-control in your life. I want you to understand your feelings before you act on them. That's one of the things we need to do here, right? Before you act on these big feelings that you kind of let spiral sometimes, understand them. Understand, where's that coming from? Why am I so down right now? Why am I so up right now? Understand your feelings before you act on them. Another way you can cultivate your self-control is to grow in the area of self-discipline. So many 4s, you feel like, I got to be in the mood to get something done. I got to be in the mood to be productive. Set a schedule for yourself and live into it. In fact, what we know is people who are healthy 4s do this. They do this all the time because they know that their tendency is to just procrastinate and not get anything done until they feel like it. They say, no, I want to be productive. So cultivate that area, cultivate self-control. And then the second thing that I want you to do, if you think you might be a type 4, is to remember that you are a child of God. You are a child of God, and that is your identity. You don't have to keep searching. You don't have to keep looking as if there's a missing piece in you. Remember that you are a child of God. Now, if you know somebody that you think might be a 4, here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. Encourage them. Encourage them and be authentic. Don't lie to them. Don't be fake around them. Be honest with them. Be authentic. And then encourage them as they go. That means so much to somebody who's searching, right? It can mean so much. That affirmation from somebody can mean so much. Would you let me pray for you? If you would, just bow your head and close your eyes just for a second. Maybe you're here today and you've always felt like you had to earn something from God, and it never really clicked until this morning that you are a child of God, and that's your identity, like you're loved, period. And so you spend a lot of time trying to earn it. You spend a lot of time trying to figure out who you are, and suddenly you're realizing, like, my life is in God, and my identity's in God, and I want to go that way for the first time, or I want to come back to that. It starts with following Jesus. If that's you, if you want to start that journey today, would you do me a quick favor? Would you slip your hand up and put it right back down? I won't make you come forward or anything like that. Okay. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you for all those who are here. We thank you for keeping us safe during the storm. We thank you that you've never left us nor forsaken us. I pray for all those listening to the sound of my voice. Help us to understand that who we are is dependent on who you are and not the other way around. Help us to recognize that who we are at our base, at our core, is your child. And that means that we aren't missing anything. Help us to love each other well, and help us to love ourselves well. It's in the name of Jesus, and we pray. Amen.